Yeah, well, it's pretty tight-lipped so far. So we haven't had that much in the way of indications of what Hegseth's message is going to be. We saw Hegseth landing in Singapore ahead of this meeting, doing the kind of stuff that is one of Hegseth's trademarks. Yeah, so going down and meeting U.S. troops here and doing a workout with U.S. troops. So, something that not really much of a signal there in terms of what we're going to hear in his speech. He's also been having some meetings. He met his counterpart from Thailand, for instance, and some announcements there in terms of defense cooperation. So
Richard,
that could be taken by some as a signal. Yeah.
Right. We're just seeing him walking to the stage, so we'll cut and hear what he's got to say.
It's great to be back in this vital Pacific region. It's not a future based on wishful thinking or utopian idealism to safeguard and secure our most vital national interests. Under the leadership of President Trump, who has over the past year shown repeatedly what it means to defend American national interests, from Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela to Midnight Hammer to cartel drug boats to epic fury. We have restored defense, reestablishing deterrence. Now, when I was in the United States Army as a young lieutenant, the motto of my first rifle platoon was those who long for peace must prepare for war. It's a simple truth that makes as much sense tactically as it does strategically. But today I want to lay out what this return to realism means for the most consequential region in the world, the Pacific. And as the 2026 U.S. National Defense Strategy makes clear, we are charting a new course for our alliances and partnerships, one that is grounded in the realities of power and interests. It is a course that will leave America stronger, our allies and partners more capable, and the Pacific region more stable and secure. The foundation of this new approach is moving away from a model of dependency and toward one of true partnership, embracing a perspective that our partners in Asia have understood for decades. Perhaps because of the hard-learned lessons of history, the default Asian lens on America has been clearer and far more pragmatic than in other regions. Our partners in Asia have long understood that the bedrock of a durable partnership is not based on idealistic values, but on the concrete alignment of national interests. There is undeniable strength in this clarity, and it's what makes our Pacific allies and partners such reliable counterweights in the face of regional threats. When our interests align, we act together with focused resolve. When our interests diverge, we adjust pragmatically, without the drama or the moralizing. I think Western Europe might take note. This is a mindset we fully embrace. The era of the United States subsidizing the defense of wealthy nations is over. We need partners, not protectorates. We seek alliances built on shared responsibility, not dependence, in a new era. It's a vision that puts our alliances on a sustainable footing, ensuring they are fit for the challenges of this century, not the last. The challenges of this century, not the last. This shift is not a matter of choice, it is a matter of strategic prudence. The National Defense Strategy makes clear that the old toothless, utopian, and globalist course of foreign policy was headed for a disaster. That all changes under President Trump. Our approach is one of flexible, practical realism that looks at the world with a clear-eyed perspective that is essential for serving vital interests. And nowhere is this clarity more important than in the Pacific. This region has profound implications for U.S. security and prosperity. It's the world's largest and most dynamic market area. It's why our National Defense Strategy directs the Department of War to set the military conditions required to achieve a lasting and favorable balance of power in the Pacific region and the expansion of its military activities in the region and beyond. We share a clear-eyed assessment of that security environment and a mutual understanding that we share a clear-eyed assessment of that security environment, and a mutual understanding that a Pacific dominated by any hegemon would unravel the regional balance of power and undermine the equilibrium we all seek to preserve. The Department of War is working with the utmost focus to prevent any such unraveling. We do not approach this challenge with needless confrontation, but with a posture of measured and deliberate strength. Our focus is measured and deliberate strength. Our focus is strong, quiet, and clear. Tensions, our priorities, and our ability to deliver on the administration's goals. This is a model our Asian partners vastly prefer and have long followed. Our allies across Asia do not seek constant escalation, rhetorical theatrics. What they want and what the United States delivers is strength that is disciplined, resolve that is steady, and leadership that is confident enough to speak and walk softly while carrying a big stick. What we seek and what the president has constantly articulated is a genuinely stable equilibrium that works for Americans as well as our ally, a favorable but durable balance of power in which no state, including China, can impose its hegemony and hold the security or prosperity of our nation and our allies in question. The United States seeks to preserve the conditions that have long underwritten peace and prosperity in this region. We are the power working to sustain equilibrium, not to disrupt it, plain and simple. We defend a status quo that has enabled extraordinary growth and opportunity across the region. Our interests in the Pacific are significant, but commerce flows freely, and nations retain the freedom to make their own choices. This is the balance America upholds and will not allow others to overturn. Under President Trump's leadership, relations between the United States and China are better than they've been in many years. President Trump and this administration seek a stable peace, fair trade, and respectful relations with China. It's not a coincidence that this has happened. Strong, quiet, but clear is the right recipe for stability. Just 2 weeks ago, President Trump and President Xi engaged in direct discussions in Beijing that reinforced this very foundation. I bore witness to their hours of candid conversations. It was truly historic. They agreed that the United States and China should build a constructive relationship of strategic stability based on fairness and reciprocity, reaffirming that while our nations will vigorously protect our respective interests, we can secure practical, mutually beneficial agreements where our interests align. Now, all of that said, my job at the United States Department of War is to provide the military strength to support President Trump's visionary and realistic diplomacy. It's our essential responsibility at the department to ensure that the president is always negotiating from a position of unquestionable strength in order to sustain peace here in the Pacific and around the globe. To ensure our military might preserve stability, we will pair it with a clarity of intent, which is why we are meeting more frequently with our Chinese counterparts. By maintaining open lines of military-to-military communication, we can coordinate, deconflict, and reduce the risk of miscalculation. This dialogue is not a sign of capitulation in either direction, but a practical guardrail, ensuring the relationship our leaders seek at the top is preserved at every level. And while a decent peace is our goal, make no mistake, America is a Pacific nation, and we insist that China respect our long-standing position in the region, and not just insist, but maintain the manifest military strength to underwrite it. Now, to get that job done, we are changing the playbook. The era of performative outrage is over. where Washington issues loud diplomatic protests that signal virtue but do not project capabilities. Going forward, we will be intentional about how and when we communicate. And we will lead first and foremost with big stick, speak softly. We will prioritize lethal capabilities, strategic discipline, and business-like cooperation over empty rhetoric and cooperation over empty rhetoric and peacocking. Any potential opponent will be forced to judge us by our hard power, collective readiness, and steadfast resolve. As the national security strategy and the national defense strategy direct, our approach in the Pacific centers on deterrence by denial along the first island chain. Now, we are reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine, the Donroe Doctrine, as I like to call it, in the Western Hemisphere, aggressively defending our homeland and our hemisphere. We will protect our people. But if you look at our department's planning guidance and our budget, we're building a team capable of projecting power, a country capable of projecting power anywhere in the world, most especially here. We will build and sustain a strong denial defense in the Western Pacific that ensures aggression is infeasible, escalation unattractive, and war deemed irrational. Our military posture will be resilient, distributed, and optimized to deny quick, decisive gains through military force. This is the logic of strategy. And it's the essence of peace through strength, and the foundation of a durable peace in the Pacific that benefits all of us. We all benefit from such a policy because our quiet but clear strength will lead to stability and peace. But this is not a burden America can or should carry alone. A favorable balance of power requires capable allies with real military strength, real industrial capacity, and real political resolve. For too long, the security of this region has rested disproportionately on American military power to atrophy. That's a bad deal for the American taxpayer, and it's an unsustainable crutch for our allies and partners. Instead, we are all best and partners. Instead, we are all best off when, based on our comparative advantages, we all contribute to the shared goal of peace and stability. This is not a my way or the highway approach. We are ready to work with all of you, where you are, based on your own situation, your own geography, and your own cultural, political, and economic realities, to ensure that a Pacific free of any dominant hegemon is secured. And that's why a core line of effort in our national defense strategy is to increase burden sharing with U.S. allies and partners, and simultaneously empower them to contribute to our collective defense. Essential ingredient of our strategy. President Trump has been crystal clear about this from day one in his first administration and now in his second. Alliances only work when they are true. Now in his second. Alliances only work when they are true partnerships. It is a two-way street. You don't have a strong alliance unless everyone has skin in the game. No freeloading. History is not over. Alliances are not judged by the number of flags, but by the number of formations. We don't need more conferences, we need more combat power. I'm sorry to say this here. Less Shangri-La, more ships, more subs. For too long, polite pleas from our European allies to spend more on their own defense fell on deaf ears. They're finally playing catch up, and we let ourselves get distracted by empty globalist rhetoric about the rules-based international order, while European capitals threw open their borders and hollowed out their militaries. You can have all the rules you want, and rules are great, but if you can't back them up with hard power, the rules are not worth the paper they are written on. Europe and NATO have some big decisions to make, and more on that soon. These same principles apply in the Pacific, albeit of course, in different circumstances. In this region, I'm optimistic that our allies, driven by our shared national interests and the unprecedented threat environment, will step up and step up for real. In fact, we're already seeing progress. If you want to see what burden sharing looks like, consider the Republic of Korea. South Korea has invested consistently in its own defense, not because it does not have the luxury of treating war like an academic exercise. They live on the front lines, and so they build real combat power. President Lee's decision to increase defense spending to the new global standard of 3.5% and to assume greater responsibility for its conventional defense reflects simply a clear-eyed understanding of the threat environment. It won't be easy, but it's necessary for the security and prosperity of his country. This was a hard-nosed decision because they see the world as it actually is. We applaud the pragmatism and leadership demonstrated by Seoul. The region will be far more stable and more secure when other allies and partners follow that path. We see this same realist mindset from the Philippines. Manila is shifting its focus to external defense and enhancing interoperability with U.S. forces. And it's not just talk. Earlier this month, we concluded the largest ever Balikatan, which featured joint training and exercises involving the most advanced U.S. capabilities. The Philippines is also investing more to modernize its military and its Coast Guard, with President Marcos signing a budget this year that includes a 12% increase in defense spending. This spending increase will fund the Philippines' multi-year effort to develop a modern, technologically advanced, and interoperable force that can plug in and fight alongside American warfighters. We're seeing a similar and critical shift in Tokyo. Japan is taking concrete steps to accelerate its defense transformation. Together, we are enhancing our force posture and investing in the right capabilities. We're not at the finish line yet, and there's still some heavy lifting ahead, but the momentum is headed in the right direction. We have high expectations of our Japanese allies, and together we can and must each pull our weight to strengthen the U.S.-Japan alliance. Strong, quiet, clear. Australia is stepping up. Together, we are expanding the rotational presence of U.S. forces and collaborating to ensure our defense industrial base build and sustain weapons required for a high-end fight. We appreciate Australia's investment in real combat power and the commitment to integrate more deeply with the U.S. Joint Force. Across Southeast Asia, we're seeing our partners step up also. Our hosts, Singapore, consistently punch above its weight by investing heavily in its military and serving as a vital hub for U.S. logistics activities and rotational deployments, strengthening our shared regional posture. Indonesia, too, is making important strides as it modernizes its armed forces and expands the scale of military exercises with us and our partners, strengthening interoperability and reinforcing regional stability. I also want to recognize Malaysia's leadership in rapidly deploying ASEAN observer teams to monitor the Thai-Cambodia border. That is burden sharing in action. Nations in the region stepping forward to preserve peace, reduce tensions, and support diplomacy with credible capability. I commend Malaysia and ASEAN for their efforts in support of President Trump's historic peace deal. On the mainland, Thailand continues to deepen military cooperation with the United States to enhance interoperability and develop necessary readiness. Thailand, a longtime U.S. partner, investing even more. We're also seeing the same seriousness of purpose from Vietnam. Hanoi is diligently modernizing its maritime capabilities while expanding pragmatic defense cooperation with the United States. Vietnam is a great example of how nations with distinct histories and different political systems can work together in practical ways, advancing discrete efforts where our interests align to maintain a stable regional balance. And in South Asia, India is a critical anchor to hold the line. A powerful India acting in its own self-interest advances our shared goal of maintaining a balance of power across the region. India is modernizing its military to carry its share of the security burden, particularly in the Indian Ocean. It's building out the heavy industrial and logistics capacity to sustain high-end military operations, including the ability to repair and maintain our shared platforms and support U.S. Navy vessels operating forward in the theater. We've also committed to pursuing co-production with India to advance capabilities like Javelin anti-tank guided munitions. Real, tangible steps to improve the collective readiness of our forces. This kind of industrial muscle isn't just a long-term goal, it's an immediate operational imperative. And the United States Department of War is leading the way. America is undergoing a historic national manufacturing mobilization of our defense industrial base. We will produce the best weaponry in the world at scale, at speed, and at a reasonable price. This is my personal commitment to all of you, and it is our president's demand. On defense last year, plans to make a generational investment of $1.5 trillion on defense this year to unleash America's arsenal of freedom, and expand America's military dominance for decades to come, a generational investment. President Trump is setting the gold standard. We demand 3.5% from our allies and partners, and we are going well beyond that number. We expect every single ally and partner to match that kind of resolve. For those nations that rise to this challenge, that embrace responsibility as true partners, the benefits will be clear. As our strategy states, we will prioritize working with model allies, those nations who are most capable, clear-eyed, and ready to defend their national interests. For those nations, we are moving them to the front of the line. Expedited arms sales, deep industrial base collaboration, expanded intelligence sharing, the list goes on, the benefits many. But for those who believe they can continue to free ride on the generosity of the American taxpayer, hear us now. Those days are over. Allies face a clear shift in how we do business. President Trump believes in helping countries that help themselves. And the United States Department of War feels that help themselves. And the United States Department of War feels the exact same way. That is the nature of burden sharing. It's what we owe each other, and most importantly, what I owe the American people and my troops, the most precious asset we have. The world today is under matter of strategic necessity. We have a responsibility to our people to shape the world that comes next. And under President Trump's leadership, that is exactly what the United States of America is doing. And under President Trump's leadership, that is exactly what the United States of America is doing. The U.S. War Department is advancing an America first, peace through strength, common sense agenda. We are reviving our warrior ethos inside our ranks. We are deterrence that was so dangerously allowed to erode under the Biden administration. Under President Trump, we have the most powerful and capable military in the history, of the world. But our approach is not one of isolation. America first does not mean America alone, but it means realist engagement with a clear eye toward defending our most vital national interests. It's an approach that values actions over words and sees alliances as true partnerships, measured by the sovereign strength and capabilities brought to bear by each. Models of partnership is not a cynical compromise, but instead the most realistic and reliable foundation for enduring peace in the Pacific. Our approach asks Pacific nations to do what many are already eager to do: invest seriously in their own defense, contribute more to collective security, and work with the United States in pragmatic ways that advance our shared interests. If there was a thesis statement for my remarks this morning, it would be this. Join us, team of strong, self-reliant nations fully capable of defending their own sovereignty while contributing to our collective security. In preserving the favorable balance of power that benefits all of us. Strong, quiet, clear. I've said this before, but it bears repeating again and again. Those who long for peace must prepare for war. From my first platoon to the first island chain. Let that remain at the forefront of our minds because we all long for peace. That time is now. The challenges we face are real, but so is the opportunity before us. We must meet that moment. Troops in harm's way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth there speaking. He had quite a lot to say, talking about a return to realism. He talked about a new course that the US is charting. There's quite a lot about countries being able to beef up their own defenses, to be able to defend themselves and show strength rather than, as he said, freeloading or not getting free rides. Let's bring back in our Chief International Editor, Richard Walker, as well as our Asia-Pacific Bureau Chief, Georg Mattes. Good to see you, Georg, as well. Both of you, it would be good to hear what your reflections are on that speech. Maybe, Richard, we could start with you and then go to Georg.
Yeah, and Tommy, just let me know. We're going to be listening in also to the Q&A, which is likely to be taking place between Hegseth and the chair of the IISS, or?
I will just check with the desk here. What do we say? Okay, we'll come back to you both in a second. Let's listen in on what's being said. There might be a few more nuggets there, and
but
then we'll pick up.
I feel some countries might underestimate the U.S. commitment. When tensions occur between allies and like-minded states, even tensions are slight, there will be someone attempting to drive a wedge between us. I feel the U.S. commitment is unwavering, which might be underestimated by some countries, but you are here with us today. That speaks the strong message. Japan has recently revised its policy on the transfer of defense equipment and technology. Philippines and New Zealand and Indonesia too. We are making those efforts to establish resilient supply chain so that countries in the region can help each other in case of crisis. I believe this initiative is aligned with the arsenal of freedom. Is my understanding correct? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Koizumi. Minister, straight away, and then we group a few questions together. Is that okay? Yeah,
absolutely.
Please.
Well, Minister Koizumi, thank you for the question, for your friendship, for your engagement. I think our countries and our personal engagement is demonstrative of the kind of commitment the United States has to allies and partners. And we appreciate the extent to which you and your government have stepped up. And I think there's sort of two real ways when I look at how the world may view our commitment to this region. First is through our national defense strategy, and we very clearly listed 4 pillars. It was the homeland of the hemisphere, deterring China in the Indo-Pacific, burden sharing hemisphere. For us, that was a reorientation toward a forgotten aspect of our defense strategy. We had a wide open southwest border that allowed 20 million illegals to pour across our borders that the Department of War was focused on securing. We've got a cartel problem of foreign terrorist organizations where we can't just defend at the border, but we need to defend in depth. So we've created the America's Counter Cartel Coalition, working with allies and partners, and where we can't just defend at the border, but we need to defend in depth. So we've created the America's Counter Cartel Coalition, working with allies and partners in Central and South America to holistically get at the counter-cartel challenge. Key terrain like the Panama Canal, It's something we lost focus on, we're refocused on, and Venezuela's seen a complete change, which creates complications for our adversaries. So staying focused and bringing renewed energy to Southern Command, which had been kind of a sleepy backwater command and now is a warfighting command in our own hemisphere, was something we had to do institutionally. But if you look at our defense planning guidance or our national defense strategy, we are funding toward, exercising toward, and planning toward the most difficult problem set, which is power projection into this region and working with our allies and partners. So there's a refocus in what we do in our own neighborhood, but in understanding that a $1.5 trillion investment from cislunar to subsea is what's required in order to deter. People want to conflate that we have global obligations with turning of our backs to this region, and that's why I've made more trips here than anywhere else, and have met and will continue to meet with individual countries and in collectives, and have met and will continue to meet with individual countries and in collective settings like this to demonstrate we are quietly but very strongly working by, with, and through allies based on our mutual commitments to strengthen our capabilities out here. We still have global obligations to ensure that, say, Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. We're focused on that. We can do two things at one time. We're supercharging our defense industrial base so that we're building 2x, 3x, 4x the munitions very soon to ensure that all of our O plans are properly funded throughout the world. So I think because there's been a lot of talk previously in the US government about pivots that were never real, there's an instinct to want to look at this and say that it is not. But I think it's the exact opposite. Underneath our entire approach is a substantive, serious approach to the Pacific, while also ensuring we maintain our obligations around the world. So thank you for your question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We'll group a few questions together now. The list is extremely long already, so I'll pull out a few. First in this round, please, from Korea, Dr. Chung-Min Lee. Chung-Min.
Thank you, Bastian. Mr. Secretary, thank you for your positive remarks on the ROK-US alliance. We are fully committed to every single matrix you mentioned on a self-reliant defense posture. In this regard, my question to you, sir, is twofold. Number one, President Trump said yes to President Lee's request for reliant defense posture. In this regard, my question to you, sir, is twofold. Number one, President Trump said yes to President Lee's request for American support in building nuclear-powered submarines for the ROK Navy for larger deterrence missions. And number two, wartime OPCON transfer to the ROK within the next couple of years. Could you please enlighten the audience on these two aspects of the strong and stronger U.S. ROK alliance? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chung-Min. We'll take one or two more in this round. Next, please, from China, Weibin Zhao. Your microphone is on.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I'm seeing that during President Trump's historical visit to China, the two countries have agreed upon a new definition. The two countries have agreed upon a new definition of China-U.S. relations, which is constructive of China-U.S. relations, which is constructive strategic stability. So what's the implication of this new definition for U.S.-China military-to-military relations in particular? As the head of the War Department, how would you implement the consensus reached by the two heads of states in real tangible steps rather than peacocking? Yes, so how would Pete bring peace in and war out? Bring cooperation in?
And we'll take from the United States, Douglas Greenlaw.
Secretary Hegseth, thank you for your principle to major emphasis on the key core principles like lethality, reconstruction of the defense industrial base, including accelerating reconstruction of the defense industrial base, including accelerating innovation by leveraging private capital and commercial technology. What would you like to see from private capital to help scale these innovations, including internationally, so they can be useful not just to the U.S., but to the defense posture of the Indo-Pacific?
Thank you very much. I see we have a young leaders group here as well, and I want to get in one of the younger voices in the room as well. So if we can please get from Pakistan, Tanzila Khalil, your microphone is on. And then we'll return to the Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Recently, it was identified by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, that Pakistan's potential ICBM capability as a future threat for the US. I wanted to seek your comment on how do you assess India's long-range missile capability, particularly in terms of the recent test of Agni-6 ICBM with a range of approximately 12,000 kilometers. Which could potentially place some parts of Europe and America within reach.
Of the themes there as well. So, Mr. Secretary, can I invite you to weave your way through these various comments?
I can't weave as well as my boss can. Not possible. First on Korea, I see General Brunson is here, our commander, who does a phenomenal job there, ensuring that partnership is realized and deepened every single day. And I think it really does exemplify the kind of partnership, and that's why I led with the remarks about what South Korea's done. I was there when the president talked about nuclear power submarines. I think it's an important capability. I think we're looking for allies willing to expand subsea capabilities that produce real dilemmas. And I think that's what we recognize is that our undersea warfare capabilities is unmatched, substantially unmatched, and creates a lot of strategic dilemmas for potential adversaries wondering where we are and what our capabilities may be. Allies and partners seeking similar capabilities in their own defense and in regional stability makes a lot of sense to us. So I think when you're working with and talking to President Trump, someone who's willing to think outside the box and shake up sort of a stale view of what may or may not be possible, expand the Overton window, and is to come alongside countries that want to run quickly. Now, there's challenges, and how we get past them will require collaboration, but we're very much committed to that. And then as far as wartime OPCON transfer, the General and I have, spent a good chunk of time recently talking about that. The General and I have, spent a good chunk of time recently talking about that. We met recently in the Pentagon with your Minister of Defense on that very topic. And frankly, it's a breath of fresh air for an ally to want to take more control more quickly. And that is an instinct we want to continue to incentivize. And I think we have to find the balance of where our military O-plans and the responsibilities that U.S. uniform over to wartime OPCON transfer for the Republic of Korea, which we welcome the fact that they want that. And I think it provides even more optionality. We welcome the fact that they want that. And I think it provides even more optionality for both the Koreans and the United States there in the peninsula going forward, which is a very good thing. So I appreciate that question. The second question was from Colonel, the Chinese military. Thank you for that question. And I think I was there when the conversations were had about constructive strategic stability. I think that was a great framing from both leaders about what they want from that relationship. And I think it's hard to understate the importance of interpersonal diplomacy and how strong it can be. I think in this particular case, it's quite meaningful. I think there is a mutual respect, a recognition of capabilities and power, respect, a recognition of capabilities and power, and how that could be most usefully leveraged in the world today with both powers. That I want to reassure this audience, I think it's real, I think it's substantive, and I think it's meaningful for the history of peace in the region and the world. What he has communicated to me is that manifests in mill-to-mill cooperation, that in forums like this, we maximize the opportunities to confer. I wish my counterpart was here at this conference, but I look forward to other options when we can cross paths and communicate, talk about things where often actions at sea or actions in the air are perceived differently when there's no communication than when there's an opportunity at the more tactical or operational level to talk about what deconfliction look like. And I think what you'll get from the United States is good faith engagement. Clear-eyed, but good faith engagement that we are, I understand commander's intent. And the President Trump has said we're going to establish this type of framework, and I think it's important for peace in the world. The third question was about defense innovation and private capital's role. The static model of how the United States of America procured weapons and acquired weapons was insufficient for the modern age. You effectively had 5 prime contractors who were appended, in some cases, in not all cases, but in too many cases, appendages of the Pentagon bureaucracy, and had been grown accustomed to meeting the cost overruns, the time overruns, and the congressional annual system that gave everyone excuses to perpetuate that. Didn't give us enough, fast enough, always seeking the 100% solution that arrived a decade later, as opposed to the 90% solution that we get in the hands of warfighters 2 years from now. And so I think one of the unsung heroes of our department is my Deputy Secretary of War, Steve Feinberg. He's our secret weapon. He came from the business, truly. If you don't know him, you should get to know him. He came from the business world and has taken that very same business mindset, I think for the first time ever, inside the Pentagon, and has effectively said, and there's a lot of micro aspects to this macro approach, but if you want to do business with the Department of War, we'll make a trade with you. We will give you long lead times on critical munitions that we're clearly going to be purchasing for 5 to 7 years, or platforms. We're going to move into platforms. We're going to move into ships. We're going to move into airframes, you name it. You know we're going to be buying these, and Congress has been willing to move into multi-year procurement for us, which is a statutory requirement eager committees have given us and we have to be responsible with. But in exchange for 5 to 7 years of orders, we're demanding that those companies invest in their own infrastructure. So these companies are paying for new factories, new lines, new production facilities to the tune of $50 billion of capital. $50 billion that's not coming from U.S. taxpayers. It's coming from companies. $50 billion that's not coming from U.S. taxpayers. It's coming from companies who would otherwise, in a world of private incentives, made those investments, but it's become cozy and easy to get the taxpayers to pay for that and then pay for the munitions as well. And we've hundreds of production lines coming online for critical munitions, Tomahawks, or our partners do. It's not add another shift to try to eke out another 100. It's build 3 more plants so that we can 3x, 4x, and 5x the amount of those munitions that we are creating, which gets skin in the game for those companies as well. And through doing that and opening up our bureaucracy, which we go to war with our bureaucracy every single day, our job is to make sure we don't have 5 prime contractors by the time I'm done, but we've got 10, 15, or 20 who are able to compete on an equal footing, and now you really are building an arsenal. And then if you add on top of that co-production with partners around the world who want to do the same, now you're building a global arsenal of freedom that we require. We take responsibility, we take very seriously our responsibility as the foundation for Western defense, but the more rich countries, because of the reality of the moment, the more options we're all going to have. And so we welcome that and want to be a leader there. The final question was about India, Pakistan. And I mentioned India, Pakistan. And I mentioned India here, but I very easily could have mentioned Pakistan and the role that the Field Marshal and the Prime Minister are playing in peace negotiations. I think an unexpected development and a true friendship developing there, which I think is important. And you saw that in the ability of the President to come together on brokering a peace between India and Pakistan, 2 nuclear-capable countries. I think both sides there are going to see understandable threats coming from the other, maybe some of which we see differently, and countries are going to want to develop ICBM threats, but we're not pointing a finger, at least from our view right now, at either country and calling them a threat to us, and we're grateful for, in each of their lanes, the benefits they've given to peace around the world.
Excellent. Let us get one more round of comments and questions in. And if I can ask for crisp, short questions so that we can get to answers. First one in this round from the United Kingdom, Tom Beckett. First one in this round from the United Kingdom, Tom Beckett.
Applauding the defence procurement changes that you're making in the 14 billion FMS to Taiwan had been paused to preserve stocks for epic fury. Looking to the future, that's fine. In the here and now, how do you reconcile that with expedited arms sales for partners?
Thank you very much, Tom. We take another question from China, Dong Wang. Your microphone is on.
Thank you for your speech, Secretary Hegseth. Most recently, U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Xavier Bronson made a striking remark in a public interview, stating that South Korea is "quote-unquote" a dagger in the heart of Asia aimed at China. This comment stands in a stark contradiction to the spirit of a constructive China-U.S. relationship of strategic stability, which our two presidents agreed to build during President Trump's most recent visit to China, which you also just referred to in your speech. President Trump in particular has also repeatedly emphasized his desire to forge the best possible relationship. Since statement represents the official position of the Trump administration and its characterization of South Korea's role as a dagger aimed at China, authorized or endorsed by the Pentagon? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The General is in the room, so he has an opportunity to perhaps follow up with you in the coffee break. But let me get this round. And we'll next turn from India to Vipatrap Vikram Singh. Vipatrap.
Thank you, Bastian. Secretary Hegseth, how does the Department of War expect to establish equitable cybersecurity partnerships with allies who may lack the domestic intelligence and technical capabilities? Is there a risk that this may create an overdependence on the U.S. private sector, which might further perpetuate a protection-based model for cybersecurity in the region?
Thank you very much. And we take from... Thank you very much. And we take from Phil. Anna.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. They have recently outlined a plan to get from 1% to 2% of GDP, a long way from 3.5. Would you consider New Zealand to be a free rider? Thank you. To 2% of GDP, a long way from 3.5. Would you consider New Zealand to be a free rider? Thank you.
Certainly sharp and clear question. We will take from Australia, which I think was mentioned, and our young leader group, Lee Sun.
Strategic equilibrium. What issues or conflicts in the region is the US most concerned about?
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll just lob in one final one from Thailand, Panitan Watan Yago.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your remarks. Very strong, loud, and super clear. In Thailand, I think Thai public opinion about the U.S. is not good. Public opinion about the U.S. is not good, given the fact that we are one of the oldest allies and benefited a lot more from trade, surprisingly. On the other hand, public opinion about China is not that bad, still very good, given the fact that the Chinese scammers are doing a lot of damages to Thai public and a lot of Chinese weapons on Thai-Cambodian borders. Under your leadership, Thai-Cambodian borders, under your leadership, what can you do about it? And if I may, what can Thailand do more about it, in your opinion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, a very rich set of themes to address that first point on Taiwan arms sales, and then we'll get through the other questions.
Yeah, and we feel very good about our stockpiles, both how we use them and in epic fury in this historic moment. And I don't think enough credit has been given to President Trump for his willingness to take on this global threat and do so through Admiral Cooper and our CENTCOM commander in a devastatingly effective way. And you know, status as of right now is that any deal will be a good deal. And I had a chance to talk to President Trump this morning. He wanted me to reiterate how patient he is in ensuring that with America undertaking this kind of historic endeavor, any deal will be a good one because of how the implications of how that sorts out. And certainly our department, we were in a cabinet meeting just a couple of days ago, and the president said, hey, it will be a great deal. And if Iran doesn't want to make a great deal that ensures they don't get a nuclear, the only time I've ever been accused of being on the left. And he was pointing at the War Department, and we're serious about that. Our ability to recommence if necessary is, we are more than capable. Our stockpiles are more than suited for that, both there and around the globe, because of how we balance exquisite and more plentiful munitions. So we're in a very good place. And I wouldn't, Hung Kao is fantastic, but I would not couple the two in any way at all. And I feel good about not only where we are, but where we are in future production rates as well. And I think there's been a lot of false reporting we're going in the future. Any decision about future Taiwan arms sales, as the president said, will rest with him. And as a nature of that relationship, and certainly having been there for those meetings in Beijing, will rest with him. And as a nature of that relationship, and certainly having been there for those meetings in Beijing, there's no change in our status there. So just to clarify. On the floor to an esteemed American general, General Brunson on South Korea, and then I'll take it from there if you want. I don't know if we can turn his mic on.
Yeah, can we turn on General Brunson's mic, please? Can you press the button on the, I think, if we can get some support here, please. We need to insert the badge, probably. Okay, yeah, there we go. General.
Thank you. If you could please raise your hand, the gentleman who asked the question, that I might look at you directly. What I said was trying to describe the operating environment, because what's incredibly important in being strong and quiet is about being able to describe the environment wherein we're working. If you remember, the Prussian philosopher, military philosopher Clemens talked about being able to describe the environment wherein we're working. If you remember, the Prussian philosopher, military philosopher Clemens talked about Korea being a dagger pointed at Japan. The difference is we have to change our perspective, which is why the East Up map is important. By changing our perspective, we take into account how the right capabilities within the Republic of Korea, but we have to understand that those things still exist, and you have to combat those things every day. What I was trying to do in a place of learning was talk to War College students about how we have to change our perspective. Service secretary, but then my secretary, my boss in the Department of War, on what things we might do. The secretary also mentioned OPCON transfer. The position that we have within the peninsula, based on our great allies represented by Minister of Defense Hong Bak, who's right here in the front row, is important. But what's also important is that we have the right capabilities at the right place in the right time, but also take into account our perspectives. I'm encouraged by the fact that my president and my secretary went to China. That is tremendous, and that we might have increased relationships where we might talk. And we have to remember that when we're talking to students, we want them to understand and appreciate other perspectives other than our own. So many times over the course of my career and the secretary's career, we've thought blue and red. Well, now there's a green there where we might have in this green space the opportunity to talk and to have military thought. The only way there will be philosophers in the future wearing uniforms like myself will be that we enter into the field of ideas. And we challenge
Right, so just following the events there at Shangri-La, where the top Asian security summit has been going on. We heard from Pete Hegseth, the US Defense Secretary, giving quite a bit on relations, the US strategy towards the region. And with that, I'd like to bring in our colleagues on the ground, Richard Walker, Chief International Editor, as well as Georg Mattes, who's there as well from the summit venue. He is our Asia-Pacific Bureau Chief. To the two of you, starting with Richard, what are your immediate reflections from Pete Hegseth's comments?
Yeah, so Tommy, we were speaking just before the speech about what were the anticipation, what could be coming from Pete Hegseth, and what might contrast with the speech that he had last year. And the contrast was pretty clear, yeah? So last year, there were 4 mentions of communist China talking about Chinese aggression. There were 5 mentions about Taiwan and the risk from China towards Taiwan and how the United States viewed its potential role in a conflict there. This time, no mention of communist China, not a single mention of Taiwan by name, just potentially implicitly through referring to this the first island chain of islands that border China to the east. So, and talking about kind of using strong, quiet, clear language was what he referred to. So really a significant shift in tone from Hegseth compared to last year. And I think this really all comes down to that recent summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, where the two leaders had a pretty friendly meeting. Both leaders showering each other with all sorts of platitudes, and Trump afterwards starting to adopt some of the Chinese narrative around Taiwan. And interestingly, Pete Hegseth picking up the kind of description that the Chinese are going for about the type of relationship that they're aiming for with the United States, one which is referred to as constructive strategic stability. Well, Pete Hegseth picking up that phrase in his own speech and referring to it also in the Q&A session there. So a pretty significant shift in the tone of what Hegseth is saying towards a friendlier message towards China, while at the same time saying that the United States is still committed to security in this region and aiming for what he said is a balance of power. What he said is a kind of realism in its approach to this region, recognizing that China is a force to be reckoned with, recognizing that it has very, very significant capabilities, but indicating that the US wants to stay here in order to at least balance China's power.
Let's hear from Georg. There was a bit of a shout out to partners in the region. I'm just wondering how all these countries will take that speech.
Yeah, it's really a mixed bag for Southeast Asian countries here. As you have pointed out, it's clear that this is a good message that he individually praised some of those countries. But on the other hand, he presented this picture of that deterrence and not diplomacy is key. Now, clearly for countries here in the region, the fact that this is a realist approach, as Richard has pointed out, is nothing new. That is something that countries in this region have already been following through for some time. But what is more concerning is that their values, I'll have to say, I hear myself very loud. Sorry for the technical issue. So the problem is not that it's a realist approach. That is something these countries are very well aware of. But it's more the idea that he indicated that the US will expect more. And that could mean for Southeast Asian countries that this involves that they need to take more risks And that is something that will not go down very well. They don't want to be drawn into the China-US rivalry anymore. They feel like they already carry a big burden, an economic burden of this rivalry. The fact that there is that there's this Gulf of in Iran, the problem created a lot of economic problems here.
Right.
And so they will be a bit concerned about that.
Okay, I'll just let you sort out the audio issues. Meanwhile, I'll get back to Richard. There was Pete Hegseth talked about the need for capable allies, no freeloading. I'm just wondering whether that was targeted at specific countries or whether it was just a general warning.
Yeah, well, I mean, what was quite interesting, and incidentally, so Hegseth just walked with his delegation past us just here. So yeah, movement going on here behind us in the lobby area of the hotel. But yeah, I think what was quite striking was that Hegseth's message in terms of burden sharing included quite a lot of Europe bashing. You know, I mean, he's many thousands of kilometers away from Europe here, but he yeah, had quite a few lines in there where he was you know, bashing Europe as toothless globalists, saying that we need partners and not protectorates. We don't want the drama and the moralizing, that Western Europe might take note of that. So I think the fact that there's been, you know, a renewed kind of period of falling out between Europe and Donald Trump in recent weeks and the last couple of months, really, relating to the Iran war, that Trump has been disappointed that the Europeans haven't been helping him more with his war in Iran, seeping into Hegseth's message here. And he's been trying to turn that to a positive message for Asia, saying, well, you know, essentially Europe is full of moralizers who wag their fingers at people, but are essentially toothless, and seeing Asia as a continent that is more realist. And his message being that the United States is not here to lecture some of the countries here that are less democratic, for instance, than the United States. It's not here to lecture them about their governments, but it wants them to be strong partners in the region. So I think to some extent that's a message that will be, you know, welcome in Asia. And there's certainly countries here that also don't like what they see as Europe's sort of tendency to nag and wag the finger over issues like human rights. But I think on the other hand, seeing that kind of bashing of allies and partners just adds to this sense that the United States is simply not the kind of dependable power that it used to be, that it has become a very difficult and unpredictable partner to deal with, that can kind of turn on a dime against a friendly country, as we've witnessed, you know, in recent months between, you know, this sort of collapse of the relationship between the United States and India, which the US has recently been trying to patch up again. So I think while bashing Europe might work rhetorically for Hegseth here at the moment, it's not necessarily going to endear him to everybody here in the halls in Singapore.
Just bring Georg back in. Just wondering, a lot of the Southeast Asian nations, when they hear about this charge, really, to beef up their militaries, to invest in defense, to contribute as well, is that something that these countries would be up for, or is there still a kind of somehow looking to the US for a bit more?
I would say, frankly, when Hegseth says, we need less conferences like this one, we need less diplomacy, and we need more deterrence, to some extent, that is something that Southeast Asian countries have understood a long time. So you already see a military buildup, for instance, in Indonesia, as he has pointed out himself and praised, in South Korea, in Vietnam. So there is a lot of movement on that front already. I think the key thing they will hear when they hear burden sharing is that they will hear risk sharing, and that is something that is unsettling for Southeast Asian countries, because they already have, like, economically, they have a huge burden here. The Gulf of Hormuz has created a real crisis in this region. They carry the burden of this American action in Iran because economically they're very dependent on the oil from that region. Militarily, I think there's a lot of good news in here. For instance, I would say the speech is almost tailor-made for the Philippines, if you take them, because they do want to see more deterrence. To some extent, more American presence, more emphasis on military power is also good news for Vietnam. However, if you compare the speech yesterday by the Vietnamese leader To Lam and today's speech by Hegseth, I think there's a key difference here. And the difference is that the Vietnamese leader emphasized much more the rule of law, the diplomatic approach that needs to be there. Vietnam very much concerned to be drawn into a power rivalry here. You have to see that Vietnam has the biggest exporting market in the United States, but the biggest investor in Vietnam is China. So they're sitting between those two superpowers, and what they do want to avoid, and that is something that all of Southeast Asian countries share, is that this power rivalry becomes stronger. And as Hegseth emphasized more military deterrence, this could provoke China more. This could heat up the conflict. And that is something that all of Southeast Asian countries do want to avoid. As the Thai colleague in the press conference at the end has pointed out, the public opinion of the United States in Thailand is already bad. And that is something you could say for most of Southeast Asian countries.
Right. I guess we'll try and sum up now. But Richard, when you look at this, when you look at, for example, what we've seen with Taiwan, at least post the Xi-Trump meeting, and now with Pete Hegseth's speech, I'm just wondering how you would assess all of this going forward, where not just Taiwan, but a lot of these nations can chart this new course as he's described it.
Yeah, well, let's pick up on Taiwan, Tommy, because it was very striking that there was not a single mention of Taiwan in his speech. And as I mentioned last year, Hegseth mentioned Taiwan 5 times. So that's a really significant change. He was asked one question in the Q&A about an absolutely critical question now for the Taiwanese. And that is, are the United States going to move ahead with the next arms deal, which has been pretty much prepared, but not announced yet? For sale of arms from the United States to Taiwan, which the Chinese do not want to happen. And it's understood that Xi Jinping really gave Donald Trump something of a lecture about providing arms to Taiwan when they met in China. Does that now, so that deal is said to be on pause because of the need to replenish stockpiles relating to the Iran war. Does the U.S. administration then really park that arms deal for the very long term? Donald Trump said to reporters after his conversations with Xi Jinping that he regarded arms sales as a bargaining chip with China, which goes very much against previous commitments by the United States to Taiwan that it would never discuss arms sales to Taiwan with the Chinese. So this is a big question. What happens with that arms deal? There was a question to Hegseth about that. Will it go ahead? And he really said as little as he possibly could. He said any decision about future Taiwan arms sales will rest with Donald Trump. Then he said, well, having been in the room with those meetings with Xi Jinping, there's been no change in our status there. So we don't really quite know how to interpret that. But nothing really clear on Taiwan. And I think, today's speech will not have reassured the Taiwanese that the United States is as strongly with them as it was before that summit with Xi Jinping.
And if anything, he sounded quite conciliatory, relating to China. And with the Chinese
absolutely
not being present as well, I just wonder what that dynamic. He even pointed that out and suggested that there would be a need for more of that dialogue.
Just generally a much softer line towards China than last year. I mean, last year also the defense minister was not here. Hegseth called that out in his speech last year. He did not call it out in his speech this time, and he only mentioned it during the Q&A when a question came, directly responding to that. And it really is striking for him and Donald Trump to be picking up this expression from Xi Jinping, talking about a constructive relationship, a strategic stability. This is the United States adopting a framing that comes from China. That is really pretty new. Yeah, I mean, the United States has historically seen itself as a superpower, and especially since the end of the Cold War, as the superpower. It's the one who sets the terms of any relationship. Now here it is adopting a term coming from Xi Jinping. That's quite a shift.
Thank you, Richard Walker. I'll just give you, Georg Mattes, the final word on this. How would you sum this up if you were to sort of look at how these nations that have attended, or the different leaders who have attended this event? What do you think they would take away from this?
I'd say we have another 2 days now for discussions, and I think the key phrase that will stick from this speech is really the phrase that there's less need for Shangri-La and there's more need for military buildups and deterrence. I think that is what most delegates will be concerned with, because if you compare the speech yesterday by the Vietnamese leader and his speech today, you have the request for stability from both leaders here. But what you had from the Vietnamese president here is the request to achieve that by diplomacy. And now you have Hegseth, who wants to achieve this by deterrence and military buildup. And I think that is a scenario that is a bit unsettling for Southeast Asian nations here. Yes, they do want a strong US, but there are some questions about to what extent that will actually happen, and to what extent this will carry risks and consequences for them that they do not want to share. I think a number of countries here do not want to be drawn into an anti-China camp. China is the biggest investor in this region, but they do want to make sure that there is security, for instance, in the South China Sea. So I think the discussions will center on that key shift towards a realism. As a student of international relations, I must say, it's a realist statement here by Hegseth. And the question will be to what extent international law and international norms can still be upheld in a world as he has described it, of great power rivalry.
DW Asia Pacific Bureau Chief Georg Mattes and Chief International Editor Richard Walker, both at Shangri-La, Singapore, at the IISS event. That's the top Asia Security Summit. Thank you for summing that up for us. Thank you for the insights there, and to our viewers as well. Thank you very much for being with us on this live stream. You can follow all our news on dw.com. Keep subscribing as well to our YouTube channel. There'll be more on there. Thanks for watching.